Hello and welcome to episode number 37 of the Expert Table Tennis Podcast. My name is Ben Larcombe and my guests on the show today are Jeff Plumb and Alois Rosario of PingSkills. Now, it's a fairly long interview. I'm sure these guys need no introduction. Their table tennis videos are all over the internet. So I'm going to keep the intro short and we're going to get straight into the interview with Jeff and Alois. I hope you enjoy it. My guests on the show today are Jeff Plumb and Alois Rosario. Hi, guys.
Hi, Ben. How you going?
Hi, Ben.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. I've never done an interview with two people at the same time before, so hopefully this will work well and we won't talk over each other. But it's brilliant to have you on the show. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, really well. It's a cold winter over here in Melbourne, Australia, but hopefully you're getting a bit better weather over there.
Yeah, I didn't actually think about that at all. I was thinking, because obviously it's kind of quite late. It's the night here. It's the morning over there. I completely forgot that it's the winter for you and it's the summer here. So it couldn't be more different.
No, that's right.
Yeah, and Melbourne's not known for its weather. A lot of Australia's like really sunny and stuff, but Melbourne, yeah, it's not the best weather in Australia. So we've had quite a few days of just rain.
Yeah, it feels a bit English actually.
Yeah, I know all about that. Well, for everyone that's listening, I don't think you need any introduction. Jeff and Alois are the guys behind PingSkills. Got to be the biggest kind of table tennis YouTube channel, and the guys that, if you're looking at table tennis kind of instructional videos and things online, you're probably looking at Jeff and Alois. You guys have been doing that for an awfully long time now, haven't you?
Yeah, we started in 2007. It actually all began. We just put up a website and put up a first video on YouTube later that year, I think. And we were just really surprised just how many views they were getting. So we just, kept going.
Yeah, it's just one of those crazy ideas. And sorry, another one of those crazy ideas that Jeff had. He used to always come to me and say, let's try this and let's try that. And this was just another one, He said, we should start a website, a coaching website. And I said, no, that's good, Jeff. Anyway, a few months later, he sort of sends me through something and with an Ask the Coach question on there. And and I answered this Ask the Coach question that he had made up, and pretended to be someone else, don't tell anyone else. And it just went from there. The crazy idea sort of developed a fair bit, really.
So you guys were never really intending for it to become as big as it became. It just kind of snowballed.
Yeah. I mean, I'd sort of hoped it would become big, but you never imagine it's going to sort of take off like it did. And, especially the YouTube channel, just so many views and so many people just, really appreciating what we put up there. Even though some of those first videos were just horrible quality and the sound was terrible, but people were still watching them.
Yeah.
And tell us the story of how you first met each other, if you can remember back to then.
Jeff, you go.
It was a tournament, I think, the Australian Junior Nationals in 1989.
89 it was, yeah.
Yeah, and so I used to live in Canberra, which is
the coldest part of the world.
Probably 8 hours drive from Melbourne. So the under-15 team came down and we played in those nationals, and Alois was coaching one of the under-17 teams. So that's the first time I remember meeting Alois.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember Jeff when Victoria played the ACT in that match, and Jeff smashed his hand on the table and there was blood everywhere. And so that was my first memories of him.
Yeah, that wasn't a good thing, was it?
And I remember straight after that, I had to go to Perth and play a match against the Italians, and I heard later on that week that Jeff had won the under-15 Australian singles championships, and I thought, Jeff Plumb, who's that guy again? And they said, the guy that played in the ACT. I said, never heard of him. And so Jeff wasn't seeded or anything in that event, and came up and won the national under-15 title. So and also in the same year was runner-up in the under-17 title. So in his first national championships.
Brilliant. So from then on, you were You didn't forget the name Jeff Plumb.
No, exactly.
And we've actually got a video on our YouTube channel, Ben, of Alois playing against the Italians. So you should definitely put a link in your website to that video of Alois playing against the Italians.
Oh, Jeffrey, thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and search that out and stick that in there. So, okay, first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was your skills challenge, the kind of power of practice thing. I reckon some of the guys listening to this will have seen that popping up. It was kind of all over my Facebook, people tagging you in videos of them doing the various challenges. But I wonder if you could give us a little introduction into what that was and why you decided to do that with kind of all the PingSkillers.
Yeah, well, it was actually inspired by your power of practice video. I watched that and I was just amazed at the difference when you first started bouncing the ball on the end of your paddle. You just couldn't do it at all. And then, with just a little bit of practice, suddenly it looked like you just could not miss. And I was like super impressed with, the transformation. And, I've always been interested in a lot of these ideas about the power of practice and, the books Outliers and Talent Code and Bounce by Matthew Syed. So when I saw that video, I thought, wow, that's really good. We should do something similar. And, we'd also seen this video of Marcus Freitas doing these amazing little skills, bouncing the ball on the end of the table. And the one that still impresses me so much is that spin catcher where he just spins the ball up and then catches it on his bat. So we thought, it'd be good to try and get people involved and people trying these skills themselves. So that's really how the idea came about and how we started it.
Yeah, and we'd both just tried, once or twice we'd tried those skills and they were just basically impossible. The table tapper and the spin catcher and yeah, we had pretty low expectations of where we'd get to in a month. And that's why we set ourselves, a full month of doing it. But it was for me, it was really surprising how quickly that skill was able to be developed over a really short period of time.
Yeah, so you kind of split it up, didn't you? Alois, you did the spin catcher, and Jeff went for the table tapper. How did you get on with the learning process then? Because I think what's quite interesting about this is not so much the skills in itself, but what you can learn about mastery and how you kind of develop skills. What did you two both kind of pick up and conclude after doing that for a whole month?
Yeah, for the table tapper, I think it was actually quite an easier skill to learn. So I actually picked it up really quickly, and it was only within a day or two of 5 minutes a day that I was getting really, really good at it. So, which just surprised me how quickly it sort of came about because it looked so difficult when I saw Marcus Freitas doing it. And so I kind of learned that quickly. And I think the spin catch is a more complex thing. So I had, a lot more to learn. So, yeah. Do you want to tell us, Alois, about your experience?
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit more on Jeff's. And I think because he learnt that skill so quickly, he got bored of it quite quickly as well. So then his practice became a little bit more sporadic because he wasn't being challenged anymore. Whereas with mine being a harder skill, I was sort of on it pretty regularly, and I was pretty excited about it all the way through the month. There were periods that I felt like sometimes I felt okay, I've got it, and I got a little bit bored, and then other times I got frustrated and I got a little bit less motivated to train. So for me, that was the first thing, just the motivation to train coming from the challenge ahead and the achievable challenge that's sort of set in front of you, that carrot is dangling there and you feel like you can do it. And we set ourselves just 5 minutes. We're only allowed to do 5 minutes a day. And sometimes I'd get to the end of the 5 minutes and I just want to do a little bit more and want to do a bit more because I felt like I was getting there and I wanted to, get to that next level. But there were other days that, it just didn't feel right. And The ball was flying off everywhere, and the 5 minutes took so long. So that was a couple of things. The other things, like just I suppose how long it did take just to get those basics. So after the first session, by the second session, I felt like, wow, like I can feel like I can almost do this. And so that was after, less than 10 minutes of doing that skill. Whereas I had tried it before, 2 or 3 times, just maybe for 30 seconds, and been nowhere near it. The ball was just flying off everywhere. So just getting over that first little hump was quite amazing for me. That improvement was really quick in a really short amount of time. But then after that, the improvement was slower, and it was very gradual, and it was also very fluctuating too.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed, Ben, especially in those first sessions, is just how quickly the time went. Like we set a timer for 5 minutes, and the timer would go off, and I was like, that cannot be 5 minutes. Like I was really super focused. And, obviously when you're that focused, you learn a lot quicker. So I think, that's something that stood out for me is that, if you're really, really focused, the time seems to go quickly and you're going to learn things, really fast.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I noticed that you guys both were picking these skills up relatively quickly. Were you finding that your audience, kind of all the other players that were doing it, were they picking it up as fast, or do you think you had some kind of advantage because, you've got the feeling, the control of the ball and all those things already, being kind of high level players that maybe they didn't have?
Yeah, we probably had a bit of an advantage, but there were some players that did pick it up really quickly, and again, that's just the difference in people and the difference in players. Some people will pick up those skills quickly, some people won't. There was, Francisco was really good, almost straight away. He was able to do the spin catcher pretty well. And then others just, really struggle. So Daniel, who I know pretty well, did it. And Jeff and I were getting frustrated, thinking, come on, surely you can get a little bit better than that. But in the end, he managed it, but it was just perseverance over that 1 month and the constant practice. So he did it every single day, 5 minutes every single day, and posted it up there, and was able to achieve it. But yeah, you're right. The progress is different. You just can't compare yourself to the guy next door. You just can't compare yourself to your club mate with anything. And even Jeff. So if Jeff and I did a skill, Jeff's coordination, you may not be surprised, is unbelievable with a lot of things. Jeff would pick things up, in a few seconds, whereas even I feel like I would take a little bit longer than Jeff. And then someone else that's never played table tennis before, trying to do the spin catcher would, maybe take the whole month just to get to be able to do the spin bit. Forget about the catching bit. So it is really different progress of different people.
Yeah, I found that really interesting too. One guy doing the table tapper, Stanley, he had like a table tennis table that had a really thin edge. It was probably only half the size of the edge I was bouncing it against. And, the first day he was hopeless. But again, over the month, he just got better and better and better. And by the end, he was easily doing 50 and, looking like he couldn't miss. So, people definitely develop at different speeds. But I think, the constant practice, everyone can get better. And that's what I kind of like about those books, Bounce and Outliers. They talk about the power of practice. And I don't completely agree with them that there's no such thing as talent and that anyone can become as good as anyone else, because if I just go down and watch my sons, they play football, you look at the range of kids across them playing football, and some kids are just learning so much quicker than others. Some kids are so much more skilled right from a young age. So there's definitely something there. But the general theme about the practice and improving, definitely resonates with me.
Yeah, and I think all of that is lessons that people can then take into their general table tennis practice, and that whole concept of, sure, you might not be improving as quickly as your friend, and that might get you down a little bit. You think, oh, I wish I was improving faster, or this is kind of unfair. But it is unfair. But if you're just prepared to stick to it and keep working and not spend all your time comparing yourself to others, then you're going to keep improving, and you'll reach the goals that you set for yourself at some point. Maybe you won't do it as quickly as everyone else, but you can't control that.
Yeah, and I think the other really important one for me was just the fluctuation in ability over that month. So there were times, as I said, where I felt like I had it, but then the very next day, without doing anything different, I almost couldn't catch the ball at all. And again, the next day, without doing anything different, without doing any practice in between, suddenly, I just bang it, and the ball just sticks to my bat. So, fluctuation in ability just happens all the time. And the important part is that when you have those little dips, that you don't stop, that you just get out there again and practice the next day, because overall your line will be an upward trend, but there are going to be lots of ups and downs in between. And I think the players that really end up achieving the best are the ones that are able to just keep training through those fluctuations and not let them worry them too much. We often hear that, oh yeah, I was hopeless today, and I want to give up, and all those sorts of things, and that's a natural reaction. But I'm sure that Ma Long during his career had bad days. In fact, I know Ma Long during his career would have had bad days, but he would have still fronted up the next day and done his 6 hours training as well.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the old story of the tortoise and the hare. If you just keep on training consistently, you're going to keep improving. And it reminds me, I think a long time ago now, I did an interview with a guy from New Zealand, Richard Lee, and I asked him what his biggest piece of advice was, and his was that don't give up too early. He says, a lot of kids give up when, they could be just a couple of months from really making a big breakthrough. So, just perseverance is a big part of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've had loads of guys on the show, kind of decent level players, who have spoken about just that, where they kind of feel like they've hit a plateau for a really long time, and they're putting in all this training, and maybe they go and start training full time, and they still don't seem to be getting any better. And then 12 months later or 18 months later, suddenly it just clicks and they shoot up in level, and kind of all of that training has suddenly come good. But you've just got to wait for it to happen sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it'd be great now to ask you guys about I guess some of the most popular questions that have come up in the hundreds of Ask the Coach shows that you guys have been doing. You're kind of like the Q&A table tennis kings. You're just answering questions from people non-stop, day in, day out. But you must just get some real popular questions coming up all the time from players. But these are important questions, clearly, if everyone's asking them. I was wondering if you had maybe 3 or 4 questions that you just get asked all the time, but that you think are really important and people kind of need to know the answers to.
The first one that comes up and is the most common one all the time is, what rubber should I be using? Which is kind of a little bit frustrating to us, because we're kind of like, as long as you've got a decent rubber, it's not going to make a huge difference. But we kind of understand why people ask that question, because, when we were, started out filming, we just had an old video camera that we had, and we wanted to know, hey, what's the best video camera? And so I was on the website looking on the internet, looking up people that knew about video cameras, and I found this one guy that sort of had like a YouTube channel on how to shoot videos. And so I asked him the same question. I'm like, what sort of equipment should I use? And he basically came back with the same answer we give everyone about the table tennis bat. He's kind of like, it doesn't really matter. As long as you got something that's decent, you'll be fine, which I thought was kind of amusing. So I understand why people ask it all the time and are worried about it. But really, the equipment, as long as you've got decent equipment, they can generate some spin and stuff, it's not what's going to make the difference. It's the practice.
Yeah. And so another one we get a lot is about how to return serves. So, and I think that's probably one of the really biggest things that happens when we first start out in table tennis. We come up against a player that can just spin the ball a bit, and the ball starts going sideways, and it really blows your mind to start off with. And it's a feeling that I've forgotten a lot, but I do get that question so many times, this guy's doing a serve and the ball's flying off, and how do I return it? And I think the most important thing that we try to get across to players is, firstly, don't try and do too much with that return, and just utilise the angle of your racket to steer the ball back onto the table. A lot of people, when they see that spin serve, think that they've got to spin it back to the opponent and, do all weird and wonderful things. But it's just a matter of, firstly, just getting that angle of the bat right. And then the second part of that is that you just have to be exposed to those serves more and more. I always say that there's no serve in the world that anyone can do to you that if they do the same serve 10 times, that by the 10th time you won't get it back, as long as you're remaining aware of what your bat angle's doing and where the ball is ending up as well. So by just making those adjustments over those 10 serves, eventually you're going to be able to get the ball back on the table.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, because I've tried that with quite a few people, because like, the spin is just so hard to comprehend if you haven't played against it before. And if someone does a side spin serve one way and it shoots off to the left, and then they do the opposite and it shoots off to the right, people are like, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to get that back? But like you said, Alois, if you just say, I'm going to do exactly the same serve to you over and over, then they start to just adjust the angle of their bat and start to get it, so that they can get the ball back on the table. So people can pick it up quickly under the right circumstances. It's like we talked about with any of these skills.
Yeah, and it's finding a partner that can serve those serves to you and is willing to do that over 5 minutes. If you did that 5 minutes a day, on returning one serve and then returning another serve, and just building up the database in your head of what's happening when the server is making that particular motion with the bat, what's happening when it hits your bat, and just if you build up that database, eventually the connections become quick enough, and you'll be able to start to pick which one it is and apply the appropriate response with the racket angle.
Yeah, now this is what people will often refer to as reading the serve, won't they? I get a lot of emails from people that are saying, basically just, how can I learn how to read serves? Because they've heard people say that to them. And what people mean by that is being able to work out from the contact and the movement of the service action what type of spin is on the ball. Now, if you've got someone who's kind enough to say, I'm going to do backspin and do a backspin one, and then they're going to tell you they're going to do a side spin one and do it like that's kind of one thing. If you've got people just playing a game, doing all sorts of different serves, trying to make it tricky for you, what are some tips for helping people learn how to read the serve? What kind of things should they be looking at? Should they be looking at the ball? Should they be looking at the bat? Should they be looking at the kind of the arm of their opponent? What are the cues?
Yeah, so for me, definitely just watching the ball all the way through. By watching the ball, you will pick up the service action, and it's just that contact point of when the server contacts the bat onto the ball that gives you all the information. So the direction of that contact is the only thing that's influencing the ball. Everything else that happens before it and after it are totally, just smoke and mirrors, basically. So it's just that contact point that is the absolute crucial part. Then you'll also get some information on how the ball's flying through the air and then how it bounces as well. But they're so subtle, those things, that they do take a lot of time to build up that database to be able to recognize it quickly enough. But I think initially, just paying just 100% attention to the contact of when the bat hits the ball will give you the information. So, if you're looking at the server and they're contacting the ball from your left to right, then the ball's going to spin off to your right. If they contact it from right to left, it's going to spin off to your left when you hit it, and so on. So if they brush underneath the ball, then it's going to go down into the table. If they brush over the top of the ball, it's going to tend to go up higher over the net. So, but it's at the basic level, it can be simple, but as you said, just then being able to pick the variations just takes a huge amount of time, and that's why table tennis can be frustrating. But it's also the thing about table tennis that just opens up so many possibilities and windows that you can just keep exploring that make this game like obviously the best game in the world, right?
Indeed. And I think, Ben, it's really important to remember that this is, one of the hardest parts of table tennis. And, top players all the time misread serves and don't make good returns. So, just because you miss a few doesn't mean you're not good at it. It's just important to keep working on it, keep gaining some experience, and, you're never going to be perfect at it. Even the best players in the world aren't perfect at it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Great advice. Okay, any other questions that you find popping up all the time that you've got some good answers to that you'd like to share?
Yeah, there's I suppose the one about smashing or returning smashes. So I think players often see the top players play and think that they're smashing the ball whenever they're hitting the ball hard, and when they go out there and then try to replicate that, what they're doing is they're hitting the ball really flat and hard and wondering why the ball isn't landing on the table. Whereas the top players are always imparting a lot of topspin on the ball, and that's the safety net that they're giving the ball so that it dips down onto the table. So so we get a lot of questions about smashing. I'm trying to smash the ball and it's just not going on the table. Whereas, what you really need to learn is the topspin. The topspin's the key stroke in table tennis. Whether it's forehand or backhand, and just being able to learn the technique of where you start, where you finish, to make that stroke to generate the topspin on the ball.
Yeah, and I think related to that is that people don't really ask this question, but they want to be able to topspin the ball. And I don't think a lot of people have the right finish position when they first start out. A lot of people sort of tend to swing across their body a lot, and I think that leads to a really inconsistent stroke. So I think, getting the right finish position for the forehand topspin is really important.
Yeah, because I guess you've touched on this, but table tennis is completely different to tennis, badminton, squash, all the other racket sports where you are kind of swinging through the ball a lot. Table tennis, most of the time you're brushing the ball with heavy spin, and that's what beginners that are new to the sport, that's why they really get this big surprise, is because they've maybe played for fun where they're playing more of kind of like a tapping game, hitting quite flat, and it's getting the hang of actually, no, you need to be brushing the ball on basically every shot you play that kind of causes a bit of confusion at the start.
Yeah, that's right. And you often see that the really good tennis players come in and they can really match it with, your club level players when the ball's in play. But that old guy that's been playing for 50 years, all they need to do is just put a little bit of backspin on the ball and the ball's diving into the net. And these young tennis players are just like baffled that, an 80-year-old guy can beat them because they can just, put that subtle spin on the ball.
Yeah, lots of people hope that a bit of athleticism and brute force is going to lead them to victory, but it's not quite the way in table tennis.
Yes, I think it's been termed the ping pong zone on our site.
Yeah, it has. We had a question from one guy just exactly on that, and he titled this email the ping pong zone, and it was this elaborate email. So, yeah, we really like that. So we term it the ping pong zone when you come into this place where you can't beat someone who just seems to be unorthodox and uses all these crazy techniques.
Yeah, I know. I've spoken to a lot of beginners in the past who are kind of just completely infuriated that they're not able to beat old men or like seven-year-old girls. They might be like a 25-year-old bloke who's a good football player or whatever, and they're losing to like this little 7-year-old girl who's been playing for a couple of years and has good spin and everything. And that's what's so great about table tennis, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay, well, a couple of days ago, I sent out an email to everyone on the expert table tennis list saying that I was going to be speaking to you guys and to send in their questions. Had a lot of questions, and we're not going to be able to cover all of them, but I picked out 4 that I thought were particularly interesting that we could have a chat about, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on. And I've tried to pick ones that either came up quite a lot or that I know that lots of people kind of always struggle with this throughout their kind of introduction to table tennis over the first few years. And the first one was a question from Rohan, and he was touching on the idea of when you have bad habits from kind of recreational play and then you decide that you want to kind of take it seriously. And he said that he kind of played for about a year just for fun and then kind of turned up at a club, and they kind of told him that, well, basically everything you're doing is wrong in quotation marks. Like your whole technique is wrong. And I know I get a lot of emails from people that say kind of, oh, I've just turned up at a club and they've told me that everything I've done is wrong and I would have been better off not playing at all for the last year because now I've got all these bad habits and I'm going to have to unlearn everything. You must encounter that quite a lot as well with guys on the PingSkills site. What are your advice for players in that kind of situation where they've just come into it with potentially bad habits from playing recreationally?
Yeah, well, I'll let Alois talk about that a little bit. But first, I just want to say, you don't want to be discouraging people so much by saying you would have been better off not playing. And I don't quite agree with that because you're still building up some skills and you're still learning, even if it's the wrong technique, you're still gaining some information about it. So, I don't think it's definitely, you would have been better off without it. But, Alois, you've got really good technique for this.
Yeah, I think the best thing I heard was rather than trying to change a technique, is you're trying to learn a new technique. So, forget about all the other forehands that you've ever hit. You're now going to hit the whatever you can name it, the Ben Larcombe forehand. And so now you're going to learn this completely new technique of a new stroke. So it's not like that you're then going to try and unlearn anything. You're just learning something completely new, and that brings it into a completely fresh perspective, rather than trying to rub out an old mark and make a new mark. It's just, you're etching something new in the sand.
And it's amazing how well that works. Just a change of your mental frame, just how you're thinking about things can just make a big difference to how you learn.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys kind of watched many of the Expert in a Year videos that I did a couple of years back, but that was very much the strategy that I took with Sam, because he'd been playing recreationally with his flatmates for 6 months or so, kind of on the table that they'd put up in their kitchen, and developed all these bad habits. But I'd kind of just said, right, from day one, I'm going to teach you how to do a proper forehand. And, he pretty much just, once he'd learnt that, he never went back to playing his old one. That was kind of just old days. And from now on, he just had this new one. So, I found that seemed to work. And maybe we were a little bit too regimented on our training methods and things. But the idea of just, here's a new forehand, let's work on this one. And, that definitely seemed to work for him. He didn't go back to playing with his weird technique that he developed on his own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was good. And once you start using the correct technique and are getting better results, of course you're going to be encouraged to keep going with that new technique.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you said, Jeff, is really spot on, because I've definitely had people email before, kind of really disheartened that someone said that they would have been better off not playing because now they're just going to have to go backwards to unlearn everything. But what I picked up from Matthew Said's book and lots of other things is that, while technique is important, it's actually all the anticipation and, all the other things that actually make up a great table tennis player. And even if you've been playing for a year with bad technique, you've started to pick up on the cues of, that means someone's going to hit to my forehand or my backhand, and the ball does this if I do this to it. So, you've still learned so much, even if you've been playing with bad technique, that it's definitely not a waste of time at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Okay, second question comes from Erwin, And his question is kind of about the backhand, which has become a lot more popular these days. And he was asking that, well, he's been watching table tennis and he's seen a lot of the top players now doing things like using a backhand on the forehand side. And is that something that all players should be looking to add into their game, or would you say that's something that the pros are doing and new players shouldn't worry about at all? What are your guys' thoughts on things like that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different at the pro level. So yeah, we do see that the top players are moving right over into their forehand corner and playing, especially the banana flick or the side spin backhand return there. But the key is that they are so fast on their feet that they can cover that ball on their forehand side with their backhand and then get back to a more central position to be able to cover the whole table. If your general club player tries to do that, maybe you're going to really get caught out of position on the next ball. So it depends a lot on your mobility and your footwork, I think, to start off with. And then, how good is your backhand compared to your forehand? You need to make those sort of decisions. Is it worth travelling over there to make your backhand? Or is it better off just remaining in a more central position? And for me, I think for most club players, it's better to stay in a central position, utilise both sides, utilise your backhand and forehand, and that'll put less stress on your movement and enable you to play a more rounded game.
It is interesting though, because you're right. The backhand's certainly become more prevalent, and the professionals are using it a lot more. And we've sort of discussed this a bit too. Because in the past, generally you expect people's forehands to be stronger, and so I was always wondering: is the backhand actually harder to learn, or do we just practice our forehands more? Yeah. What are you? Yeah, sorry, Alice.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case initially. I think, when we start learning, often we start with the forehand. And so your forehand does tend to develop earlier and quicker. And then because you are hitting better forehands, then you tend to develop that even more. I don't think there's anything about the backhand that's more difficult to learn. For me, the only one little thing is perhaps there's a little bit more ability to adapt to different positions on the forehand, because the ball's down by the side of you and you can sort of lift your arm up and down. If the ball gets a little bit high on your backhand, it becomes a much more awkward stroke. But yeah, if someone starts out playing with strong backhands, I don't see why there's any reason why they don't develop that equally to the forehand.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the backhand is more important these days. But I guess you just need to, if you're a very new player, I wouldn't worry about it too much. And then kind of as you're improving, you can look to see if it's in your advantage to be doing that or not. So, yeah.
And it's mainly on the return of serve. Ma Long's still stepping around and playing forehands from the backhand corner and hitting winners from there. So in the rally, he's not really stepping over and playing backhands from the forehand side. It's mainly just early in the rally where he can utilise his wrist on the return of serve.
Yeah, I think that's worth pointing out. Kind of the main advantage to using the backhand over the forehand is when that ball is going to bounce twice on your side of the table, and you can actually get some leverage using your backhand. If it's going to come long and it's only going to bounce once, and you can wait and play a bigger shot, then I don't think the backhand actually has a huge amount of advantage. It's more when it's over the table, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The ability to use your wrist better on the backhand side. Yeah,
exactly. Cool. Okay. Well, third question. Loads of my readers, the guys that email me, they're actually quite a bit older. Some of them are coming to the sport kind of for the first time. Some of them are coming back after a really long break, but kind of guys that are kind of 60 plus, sometimes 70 plus. And they're often confused about kind of what kind of line they should take with developing their game. Lots of coaches are kind of coaching people in a very similar way, and I know I did this for many years, where I was so used to coaching kids that if I kind of ended up coaching a kind of 50 or 60-year-old adult, I kind of just coached them the same way that I'd coach a 10-year-old, because that was all I was used to. But kind of how should someone who comes to the sport as a relative newbie but is maybe kind of 60 or 70, how should they go about developing a game that's maybe different from a kid learning at 10 or 11?
Mm-hmm. First, you just need to learn the basics. So I think learning your strokes is important. You know, your forehand counter hit, your backhand counter hit, your pushing, etc. Once you've got that nice base, then I think you can start to think a little bit more about your match strategy. So if your mobility isn't as strong, okay, how are you going to change that up so that it fits in with you? So obviously stepping around and playing forehands from the whole table for an 85-year-old may be a little bit difficult, maybe not for some, but you just need to tailor your game. I see this a lot with the para players that I coach. So it's always about seeing what ability you have and then tailoring your game around that whole ability. So, you know, my mobility isn't so good, so I need to play more centrally so that they're not, putting me out of position. I don't need to be belting the ball all the time. You know, I want to slow the ball up a little bit so that I can keep up. You know, all those sorts of things. And then if you look at wheelchair table tennis, it's really similar. You know, they're playing a lot of balls into that crossover point, finding the strategy that's right for them to be able to play a good game of table tennis. So it's just examine what you've got and then explore what you can do. But I think my first point, learn the basics, is really important. You know, you need to have those basic strokes to start off with.
Yeah, and Alois, do you find that older people learn differently to younger people, or do you need any different methods for older people to keep them engaged? Are there any tricks around that?
I find the older people are more engaged. So they've sought you out, and they're really keen. You know, they know that the importance of time. So they are, you know, on it straight away as far as their focus is concerned. You know, often you get groups of younger kids, you know, at schools or even juniors, even top, you know, state level and national level juniors, when you giving them advice, you know, sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. You know, sometimes it's their parent that's dragging them along. But I find with the older adults that focus is fantastic.
Yeah, that's definitely the adult advantage, is that they're a lot more engaged. They're a lot more likely to be listening to everything you're saying and trying to remember it. As you know, sometimes kids, as much as they want to improve, they're just drifting off or thinking about other things or bouncing the ball on their bat. You don't get that with the adults. But yeah, I like what you said about don't skip the basics, because I think some people maybe have the thought that, I'm 65 years old, I'm not trying to be in the Olympics, I don't need to learn all these, technical shots like everyone else. But if you do want to actually become a decent player, you've got to get the fundamental stuff right, regardless of your age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, final question is from Fabio. This is a really good question. I'm looking forward to hearing your answer to this. Fabio says that he often finds that when he's up in a game, kind of 3, 4, 5 points ahead, he can kind of freeze up and start playing a lot worse. Like he's not able to play his best because he's got a bit of a lead. And then, the game starts slipping away and it goes to deuce, and then you end up losing kind of 12-10 or whatever, 13-11 after you've had a lead of, I don't know, 8-4 or, things like that. I've seen this happen a lot. I know this used to happen a lot to me when I was a much younger kid, and you start to almost doubt yourself that I don't even want a big lead, because every time I get a big lead, it slips away. What's your advice to people that kind of think that this is kind of happening in their game, that they keep freezing up and choking and letting leads slip away and then letting it go?
Yeah, and Ben, I was exactly the same. I used to freeze up and choke all the time. And so I understand the feelings really, really well. And, again, I wish I had the the not the knowledge that I've been able to collate over the last 20 years when I was playing. So for me, the most important thing is just your emotional level at that time. So you'll find that you'll start to recognize some feelings that you get when you get into that situation. So you find yourself 8-5 up, and you know that the last two games that you played against this guy, you were 8-5 up and you lost. So immediately the brain starts ticking ahead and starts to project what's going on, what's going to happen in the future, and also thinking about what's happened in the past. So it's about being able to stay right in the present and being able to focus on something they talk about the here and now. So what's that? For me, it's the ball. So if you can focus completely on the ball, then that's exactly where the game's at. So that starts to diminish that, emotional ups and downs of, I remember what happened last time, and I know what's going to happen now. I'm going to choke and I'm going to freeze up, and et cetera, et cetera. By focusing completely on the ball, then you can take your mind off it. I worked with a sports psychologist when I was playing Noel Blundell, and I think probably the first thing he said to me was that there's only one thing that your brain can process at the time. So at any given millisecond, there's only one thing that can be going through your mind, and what you need to do is to be able to just manage what's happening there in your mind. If you are thinking about the future and the past, then you need to bring yourself back to the ball. And if you're focusing completely on the ball and that's all that's occupying your mind, then you haven't got time to be starting to think about oh my goodness, I was 8-5 up the last time I played this guy, or even the previous set I was 8-5 up and I lost that one. So yeah, so that's probably the starting point for me.
Yeah, it was for me when I was younger. I didn't have this problem at all, but it was kind of as I got older, I did start to have this problem more and more. And it's when you say that, Alois, it sounds like such an easy thing. Just focus on the here and now, and it's going to solve your problem. But it's really difficult to do that consistently. But I think something like the pre-point routine, Alois, do you want to talk about that? Might also be helpful for people.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that we talk to people a lot is about the pre-point routine. So what that is just a simple set of actions that you do in between each point that you play. So for me, it used to be, if the ball was at my end, go and get the ball, take a deep breath, and then as I'm coming back to the ball to the table, I'm focusing on my tactic for the next point. Then I'll bounce the ball 3 times on the table, focus on the ball, and then I'm away again. So that was a routine that I developed for myself that I was comfortable with, that I did before every single point. What that does is it just brings the body into a familiar position all the time. So it doesn't matter if you're playing the final of the Nationals or if you're playing in a low situation where you're trying to motivate yourself more. You're playing against some guy that you beat all the time and it's really boring you to tears. But by maintaining that routine and that pre-point routine, then your body feels familiar and you just go through that same routine each time. So I think that's something that a lot of players don't have, and it's something really simple that you can develop, but develop something that you do yourself. And I suppose in tennis it's really prevalent. If you watch the better players, they will bounce the ball the same amount of times. They'll get the tennis ball from the same ball kid. They'll get the towel from the same person. All those sorts of things. So that's what those guys are doing all the time. So just develop a pre-point routine for yourself.
Yeah, and I know the temptation can be to look at that kind of stuff and think, oh, it's silly, it's superstitious, like they think there's some kind of magic behind bouncing the ball 21 times or whatever they do. But it's not that at all. They're just getting themselves in the mindset to be ready to play, aren't they? Like they don't think there's anything lucky about doing it this many times. That's just what they do. And now they're ready to go and they've cleared their mind of everything else.
Yeah, and I was watching Kyrgios, the Australian tennis player, the other night, and the commentators actually commented on it. So they said, "Oh, have a look at him now." So normally he bounced the ball, I think it's 6 times, and he said he's only bouncing it twice, and he's rushing, and he's lethargic, and da 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 da, and that was really noticeable that he was just rushing, and only bouncing the ball twice instead of the 6 times that he usually bounces the ball.
Yeah, and his performance suffered because of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic answer to that question. Guys, it's been brilliant having you on the show. I've taken up a lot of your time now, but I think almost a whole hour of interview is incredible. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on, guys.
Absolute pleasure, Ben. And thanks a lot for having us on. It's really inspiring to see the stuff that you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ben. It's been a lot of fun.
And give us some information on PingSkills, kind of exactly what is PingSkills and what kind of stuff have you got coming up over the next kind of few months.
Sure. Yep. So PingSkills, we want it just to be, the place where you can come and learn all about table tennis, learn all the strokes, ask us any questions you want. Just a good resource for learning about table tennis. And over the next few months, we got a whole lot of videos coming up. So, we're going to do videos on answers to questions people have. We're refilming a whole lot of serving videos. Just a whole lot of information for people to get better at table tennis.
Yeah, and a new format for the Ask the Coach show that we just released the first one yesterday. I think you got it up there, Jeff?
I did indeed yesterday, yep.
And what's the change there?
Oh, so instead of doing it live, we kind of did it and instead of doing one show every night, we sort of going to do one show a week and just have a longer show with a bit more demonstrations in it. So we're actually filming it at the PingSkills shed where we can do a bit more demonstrations and have a few more stories. So we're just experimenting with that format. And so, we'd love for people to jump on and have a look at it and give us some feedback on what they think about the new format.
Yeah, sounds great. Cool. I'll put the links in the description. I wanted to talk about TrainerBot, but I don't know if we're going to have time. But I see that you're going to link up with the guys at TrainerBot, which is kind of this really cool new smart table tennis robot. We probably haven't got time to talk about it now, but I'll put the links in the description that will be up on the Expert Table Tennis website for people to check that out. And I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of how that works, because it certainly looks like a really exciting project.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it's going to be exciting. It's very early stages at the moment, but we think there could be a lot of benefit in people being able to watch a tutorial and then have the robot spit out the balls in a manner that you can practice what you just watched in the tutorial. I think it'll be, really, really beneficial.
Yeah, sounds incredible. Cheers, guys. Thanks so much for joining me on the show.
Thanks, Ben.
Have a good day. See ya. Bye.
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 Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. I had a great time speaking to Jeff and Alois, and I know that this episode is going to be super popular because they're such big name guests and there's so much good content in there. So big thanks to Jeff and Alois for joining me on this episode of the show. If you haven't yet gone and checked out any of the PingSkills videos, I can highly recommend you go to their YouTube channel, have a watch, and also sign up as a free member on their website, pingskills.com. You should also go and check out their Power of Practice videos, and I've got my own one as well, so I'm going to put all the links to that in the show notes. And have a go yourself at these spin catcher, the table tapper, and the bouncing the ball on the end of your blades. 3 little skills that you can try and master. And I think it's great for your hand-eye coordination, and it's definitely going to teach you a little bit more about the whole process of learning and mastery and skill acquisition. So all those links will be available at experttabletennis.com/episode 37 in the show notes, and links to any videos, anything else we mentioned. Go to that web address if you'd like to find any of that stuff. I'll be back with episode 38 of the podcast in a month's time. That will be released on the 1st of September, and we'll be getting you ready for a new season of table tennis. Until then, please have a really good summer. If you're going away, enjoy yourself, have a little break, get yourself ready for the new season. I'll be putting up loads more content on experttabletennis.com, blog posts, videos, things for you to check out. So do keep visiting there. And if you have a question, you can always drop me an email. I'll do my best to reply to you. You can get me at ben@experttabletennis.com. That's all for this episode. I will see you in a month's time.